I woke up in the dark, not in the darkness of night, in the darkness of blindness. My eyes were open. I knew it because I could feel the cold air touching my corneas, but I saw nothing, absolutely nothing. And then I realized something worse. I couldn't move. I tried to raise my right arm. Nothing, my left. Nothing. I tried to move my toes, turn my head, do anything to prove I was still alive and not just a consciousness trapped in a dead body. But my body wouldn't respond. It was as if my brain was shouting orders that never reached their destination. That's when I heard the voice. $1 million, someone said in German, their deep voice echoing down what sounded like a hospital corridor. I bet $1 million that pilot will never walk again. His spine is destroyed, 3 vertebrae crushed. He's lucky to be alive, but walk? Impossible. The other doctor laughed. You're crazy. Nobody bets $1 million. I'm saying it's impossible. The first voice cut in. His bone marrow is compromised. He'll spend the rest of his life in bed, if he survives the infection. They walked away. Their voices faded, and I stood there paralyzed, blind, listening to that death sentence echo in my head. Impossible. My name is Günther Rall, and this is the story of how I proved them wrong. But before I tell you how I got out of that bed, you need to understand how I got there. It was May 1944. I was 26 years old and already one of the Luftwaffe's deadliest pilots. I'm not bragging, it's just a fact. At that point in the war, I had 222 confirmed victories, 222 enemy aircraft shot down, 222 families who would never see their sons return home. I didn't think much about it at the time. I couldn't, not if you wanted to survive. In war, you have 2 choices, kill or be killed. And I chose to kill every time I climbed into that cockpit. But on that day in May, somewhere over Romania, the war finally caught up with me. I was leading a formation of 4 Bf-109s when I saw them. 12 American B-24 Liberator bombers escorted by 16 P-51 Mustangs. Bad odds, but I'd faced worse. I dove in first. The sound of the Daimler-Benz DB605 engine at full power is something you never forget. That roar that made your bones vibrate, that made your heart beat to the rhythm of the engine, 1,500 horsepower of pure mechanical violence, pushing you at 600 kilometers per hour straight to hell. I pulled the trigger. The MG-131 machine guns spat fire. Tracers streaked across the sky. I saw my target, a B-24 to the left of the formation, release black smoke. Good. Next. That's when I felt the impact. It wasn't like in the movies. There was no dramatic explosion, no time to think, I've been hit. It was just a horrible metallic sound, like someone hitting my plane with a giant hammer. And suddenly, half the instrument panel exploded in a shower of sparks and acrid smoke. Fire. The smell of burning fuel, the smell of melting rubber, the smell of my own flesh starting to burn because the cockpit was turning into an oven and I couldn't open the damn convertible top. I pulled the lever. Nothing. I pulled again, using both hands, with every muscle in my body. The convertible top wouldn't budge. I was trapped in a burning plane, falling at 600 kilometers per hour. And that's when I knew I was going to die. Not in combat, not in a glorious ball of fire, but burned alive like a rat caught in a trap. I was 26 years old. I had a fiancé waiting for me at home. I had a mother who had already lost one son in this war and now was going to lose another. I pulled the lever a 3rd time. The convertible top came loose. I don't know if it was luck, the force of desperation, or God having mercy on me, but it came loose and I shot out of that cockpit like a bullet, the wind ripping me from my seat with such force that I felt my helmet come off, felt my body spin uncontrollably, felt the parachute didn't open. I pulled the ring. Nothing. I pulled again. Nothing. I looked up and saw the worst. The parachute had gotten caught on the plane when I ejected, and now it was on fire, melting, disintegrating as I fell. 5,000 meters, 4,000, 3,000. I desperately searched for the reserve parachute, found the ring, pulled so hard I felt something tear in my shoulder. A brutal tug stopped me in mid-air, so violent I felt my ribs crack, felt something break inside me, but I was slowing down. The reserve parachute had opened. I hit the tail of my own plane. The pain was... there are no words to describe it. Imagine all the force of the impact concentrated in a single point of your spine. Imagine feeling your vertebrae compress, crush, disintegrate. Imagine a burst of pain so intense emanating from your spine that your brain simply shuts down for a second because it can't process it. I woke up on the floor. I don't know how long I was unconscious. Seconds? Minutes? The sky was darker. Or maybe my vision was failing. I tried to get up. I couldn't. I tried to roll to the side. I couldn't. I tried to move my toes. I couldn't. That's when the panic came, not the panic of combat, not the healthy fear that keeps you alive. It was a primal, visceral terror of realizing that your body no longer functions, that you're trapped in a shell of flesh that doesn't respond to your commands. I heard voices, Romanian voices, local peasants who had witnessed the fighting. I felt hands turning me, lifting me up, and each movement was a new agony. Someone shouted for help. Someone else said I was going to die. I didn't die. For the next 2 days, I was transferred from hospital to hospital, from a Romanian field infirmary to a German military hospital, from there to a trauma center in Vienna. And it was there, in Vienna, that I met the doctor, Dr. Klaus Brenner, 53 years old, specialist in spinal trauma, veteran of the First World War, a man who had seen men die in every imaginable way and who no longer had any illusions about the fragility of the human body. He examined my x-rays, 3 crushed vertebrae, bone fragments damaging the spinal cord, internal bleeding, infection starting. "You're not going to walk again," he said. Not with pity, not with cruelty, just as a fact. As if he were telling me the sky is blue. Your spine is destroyed. The best-case scenario is you'll spend the rest of your life in a wheelchair. The worst-case scenario is the infection will kill you in the next few weeks. I was still blind. The explosion had damaged my optic nerves, and my vision consisted only of patches of light and darkness. "How long until I see you again?" I asked. "If you see it again," he corrected. "And as for walking, forget it. It's impossible." Impossible. That word again. It was that night that I overheard the bet. Brenner was talking to another doctor outside my room, unaware that I was awake, unaware that each word was a blade cutting into my soul. $1 million that he'll never walk again. And something inside me broke, or maybe it ignited. I don't know which, but I decided in 48 hours I was going to prove him wrong. The first thing that returned was my sight. Not suddenly, not like in biblical miracles. It was gradual, as if someone was slowly turning up a dimmer. Patches of light became shapes. Shapes became objects. By the end of the first day, I could see the ceiling of the room. I could see the damp patches on the plaster. I could see the nurse when she came in to change my dressings, but I still couldn't move. My body was a prison of dead flesh that refused to obey. I tried to move the little toe on my left foot. Nothing. It was trying to contract the muscles in my calf. Nothing. It was as if the connection between my brain and my body had been severed, as if I were a puppet whose strings had been cut. But I wasn't a puppet. It was Günther Rall. He had survived 306 aerial combats. He had been shot down 5 times and always came back. Always. And an arrogant doctor betting $1 million against me wasn't going to be the thing that would destroy me. I started with the eyes. If he couldn't move his body, he could at least move his eyes. And moving them helped his vision return. He looked to the left, to the right, up, down. He focused on distant objects. He focused on nearby objects. He forced his eyes to work until they burned. Then I tried the jaw. Open, close, open, close. Tiny movements at first, then bigger. Then I started moving my tongue, forward, backward, side to side. They were ridiculously small victories, pathetic even, but they were victories, and I needed victories. On the second morning, I managed to move my neck, just a few centimeters, a movement that made every nerve in my body scream in agony, but it moved. The nurse came in and screamed. She called Brenner. He came running, with the look of a doctor who's seen something that shouldn't be possible. "You moved your head," he said. "I'm going to do a lot more than that," I replied. He laughed, not with joy, with pity. "You don't understand the seriousness of your injury," he said. "What you did is impressive, but it's just a reflex, muscle spasms." "It doesn't mean that 48 hours, I interrupted. "What? You bet $1 million that I'd never walk again. I'll give you 48 hours. If I'm not on my feet in 48 hours, you win. If I am, you owe me an apology." He looked at me as if I had gone mad. Maybe I had, but going crazy was better than giving up. The next 24 hours were hell. Not the hell of flames, not the hell of war, the hell of absolute pain. Each attempt at movement was an exercise in self-inflicted torture. I tried to move my right shoulder. I felt something tearing inside. I tried to move my fingers. I felt electric shocks running up my arm. I tried to contract my abdominal muscles. I felt as if someone was squeezing my internal organs with their hands. The nurse begged me to stop. She said I was making my condition worse, that I was risking permanent paralysis. I didn't stop, because the truth is, it wasn't about walking, not really. It was about proving that I still had control, that I was still human, that the war might have brought me down, might have broken my body, but it hadn't broken my will, and I'd rather die trying than live as an invalid. By the end of the second day, I was able to sit up. It took 40 minutes of such brutal exertion that I vomited 3 times. 40 minutes in which every muscle in my body screamed for me to stop. But in the end, I was sitting, my head spinning, my vision blurred, my body trembling, but sitting. Brenner was there. He'd spent the whole day observing, taking notes, shaking his head in disbelief. "That's impossible," he murmured. "You keep using that word," she said, her voice weak but firm. "I don't think it means what you think it means." On the morning of the third day, 47 hours after the bet he didn't even know he'd made with me, I called Brenner into the room. He went in, expecting to find a bedridden patient. He found me standing. It wasn't a pretty position. I was gripping the headboard with both hands, my arms trembling so much it felt like they were going to collapse at any second. My legs could barely support my weight. Sweat dripped from my face. Blood stained my hospital gown, where some stitches had broken, but I was standing. And then I took a step. One. Just one. My left foot dragged across the floor, advancing perhaps 10 centimeters. It was the ugliest, most awkward, most pathetic movement any human being has ever made, but it was a step. I looked at Brenner. His hands were trembling. His face was pale. 48 hours, he said, and then my legs gave way and I collapsed to the floor. Do you think this is the part where I tell you that I've fully recovered, returned to flying, and ended the war as a hero? No. This is the part where I tell the truth. It took me 7 months to walk normally again. 7 months of brutal physiotherapy, constant pain, nights where I cried alone in the dark because every step seemed impossible. 7 months relearning to do things that a 2-year-old does without thinking. I flew again in November 1944. 53 more victories before the end of the war. 301 in total. But do you want to know the truth about that day? About the step I took in front of Dr. Brenner? He'd never made $1 million bet. He was just chatting with a colleague, speaking in hyperboles. It was just a casual hallway conversation that I, in my delirious state, turned into a personal crusade. When I told him about it months later, when I was finally able to laugh about the situation, He remained silent for a long time. "You know, if I had known you had heard that," she said finally, "I would have chosen my words more carefully. You almost killed yourself over a casual conversation." "No," I replied, "I didn't kill myself. I saved myself. Because that imaginary bet, that challenge that only existed in my head, gave me something to fight for. It gave me a deadline. It gave me a purpose when all I had was pain and despair, and that made all the difference." 6 months later, I ran into Brenner at a hospital Christmas party. He saw me walk in, without a cane, without a limp, and his face lit up. "You really did it," he said. "You really walked." "I told you I was going to do it," I replied. He laughed. "You know, I kept your x-rays. I show them to my students when they say something is impossible. I show them the 3 crushed vertebrae, the hemorrhage, the spinal cord compression. Then I show them you walking. And I say, never say something is impossible near a stubborn pilot." Brenner died in 1967. But before he died, he wrote a medical article about my case, about how psychological determination can overcome devastating physical prognoses, about how the mind can, in rare cases, force the body to do the impossible. He titled the article, "The Bet," and he dedicated it to me. I lived to be 91 years old, 91 years on legs that a doctor swore would never work again, 91 years proving that impossible is just an opinion, not a fact. When I woke up in that hospital bed in 1944, paralyzed and blind, listening to that conversation about gambling, I had 2 choices: accept the verdict or fight against it. I chose to fight. And that choice saved my life, not because the struggle healed me, but because it gave me hope. And sometimes hope is the only weapon you need. So I ask you, when life is against you, when doctors say it's impossible, when everything seems lost, will you accept it, or will you take that first impossible step? Because I guarantee you that step is always the hardest. But it's also always the most important. If this story gave you chills, if it made you question what you're capable of when all seems lost, leave a like below. Subscribe to the channel and activate the bell, because the next story is about a soldier who survived the impossible 3 times in a row, and each time was worse than the last. And I guarantee you, you won't be able to stop watching.